Let me begin by thanking you for giving me the opportunity to add some facts to the previous recordings that were not made sufficiently clear or omitted altogether. First, as background to the rise of Hitler and the unspeakable cruelties and inhumanities committed by the Nazis and their collaborators, it behooves us to take a quick look at the state of affairs of the world and Germany and its Jews in particular before Hitler came to power. The world was at peace, Germany was at peace, and the Jews of Germany enjoyed an unprecedented degree of assimilation and integration into the German fabric, its culture and mindset. They proudly referred to themselves as German citizens of the Jewish faith. After all, their existence in Germany went back to Roman times, almost 2,000 years ago, when they came with the Roman armies as slaves, or the Romans marched north to conquer and civilize much of what was then Central Europe. After the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70 AD by the Romans, they took many captive Jews to Rome as slaves, gave them Roman names, and while the Christians were fed to the lions in the Colosseum, to the enjoyment of their spectators, many of the Jews as slaves were taken by the Romans on their march north. Such Latin, German, Jewish names as Marcus, Pincus, Lazarus, Magnus, etc. are proof of the connection between Rome, the Jews, and Germany. When the Romans retreated, the Jews had no incentive to go back with them into slavery. They stayed and settled along the great rivers of Europe, where their existence is amply documented. At the time of my birth, the year 1909, Kaiser Wilhelm II ruled Germany. Germany was then considered the world's most advanced nation in all aspects of civilization and culture. Germany had given the world the concept of social security in the late 19th century under Kaiser Wilhelm I, the only country in the world with such advanced social laws. Germany prospered economically. It was considered the world's leader in philosophy, poetry, music, architecture, medicine, and other achievements. Students and postgraduates came from all over the world to Germany to acquire some of the culture and scientific achievements of their German teachers. The German Jews had made great contributions to these achievements. The question arises, how could a nation that high on the scale of culture and civilization, that much admired by so many for these achievements, fall that low into the abyss of cruelty, inhumanity, and sadism so soon thereafter? Here is some explanation, but I'm anxious to point out by no means to be interpreted as exculpation. While Germany did well on all scores and was admired and respected by all other nations in the world, there was one area where it was lacking, and that is colonies. Access to cheap labor and raw materials overseas, as other nations such as Great Britain, France, Portugal, and Holland enjoyed. Since those countries were not handing their possessions voluntarily to the Germans or share them with the Germans, the Kaiser decided to get them by force. He built the world's largest, best trained, best equipped, best led, and most disciplined fighting force. And when ready, that is, in September of 1914, declared war on Great Britain and France. I vividly remember the day World War I broke out. I had just entered elementary school. There was great enthusiasm, great excitement, and not the slightest doubt among the Germans that Germany would prevail. Their national anthem was Deutschland, Deutschland über alles, über alles in der Welt. Germany, Germany above all in the world. The people were singing their anthem not only with great fervor, they believed in what it says. There was not the slightest doubt in their mind that their army would prevail. After all, it was considered invincible and the best in the world. No other army could stand up to it. After 4 years of enormous sacrifices by the armed forces and civilians, when the unconditional surrender of the army was announced in 1918, the German people were totally unprepared. They were stunned. How could the world's greatest army be defeated on the battlefield? The answer appeared soon in newspaper, cartoons, and over the radio. When the people were told that their army was not defeated in battle, it was stabbed in the back by no other than the international Jew. The fable of der Dolchstoß von hinten, the stab in the back, took root and was readily accepted by the public in large. Caricatures in newspapers, radio talks took up this fable of the German soldier being stabbed in the back by the Jew, and that made a lot of sense to the people. The Kaiser had to abdicate and flee for his life. The German commander, however, von Hindenburg, General von Hindenburg, was considered and remained to be a hero, because it was not he and not his troops that were defeated in battle. It was the culprit, obviously, was the international Jew. And thus the groundwork was laid for the rise of Nazism and Hitler's wild and unabated hate of the Jews. Von Hindenburg, the supreme commander of the German armies, remained a hero to the Germans. He became the president of the democratic Weimar Republic, which replaced the monarchy. And a town in East Germany near the Polish border was named after him, and in his honor, Hindenburg. It is in the city of Hindenburg where I had my first job as assistant to a Jewish dentist when Hitler was elected as chancellor and handed the keys to the government by no other than General von Hindenburg in January 1933. And it is here in the town of Hindenburg where I had my first personal encounter with two uniformed Nazis that I have reported on before. As a further illustration of the Italian people's total absence of comprehension of the German people's mindset and their fanatic obsession with the persecution and murder of their own, that is, Jewish citizens, I ought to mention two further events. After graduation from medical school in Italy at the University of Naples, I was sent by the government to the University of Catania in Sicily for the required state board examinations and before being licensed to practice medicine and surgery in Italy. I was told that it was customary to visit and introduce myself to the respective examiner prior to the date of the examination. This was usually a brief encounter, a formality at best. Not so when I tried to introduce myself to the professor of internal medicine. I was directed to his home. The professor opened the door himself, unusual for a professor in Italy. He asked me to come in, unusual too, and to sit down with him. As he looked at my visiting card, he asked me, "Where are you coming from?" The answer, Germany, elicited a long and excited lecture of how fortunate I was to come from such a great country with such a great leader, namely Adolf Hitler. When I could not take it any longer, I interrupted and said, "Professor, I don't agree," and quickly added, "I think Mussolini is a much greater leader than Hitler." While he could obviously not contradict, he was also obviously annoyed and wanted to know why I did not share his admiration for the great Hitler. When I mentioned Hitler's outrageous excesses toward the Jews, after all, at that time the worst was yet to come. He looked at me and said, "If a great man like Adolf Hitler does what you just told me to the Jews, they must deserve it." I looked at him and asked, "Professor, how many Jews have you known in your life?" His answer was swift and to the point. He said, "I have never seen a Jew." Once again, I contradicted. And one does not contradict a professor in Italy, so he was visibly angry. And when I told him, "You are looking at one," he said, "Come on," and did not believe me. He obviously had the vision of a Jew with horns and the vision of Moses as created by Michelangelo. For those of you who would want to know, I passed the examination the next day. After my return from Catania to Naples as a licensed physician, my world had taken a decidedly darker turn. People of the Jewish faith who were not Italian citizens disappeared suddenly. Nobody knew their fate. Newspaper reports appeared about the goings-on in Germany. For the first time, the world took finally notice and gathered in an international conference in 1938 at a place called Evian-les-Bains in southern France to deal with the problem of the Jewish dilemma. Of 32 nations assembled, only the Dominican Republic offered refuge to 100,000 German Jews. All other countries declared their regrets, but did not offer any help. And that included the United States of America. The United States of America had a quota, and the admission of German Jews on the admission of German Jews. That quota was quickly filled and strictly enforced. Some of you may remember the refusal of the St. Louis to disembark its close to 1,000 German Jewish refugees, passengers, anchored in the harbor of New York. They were sent back to Germany and to their certain death by a liberal president named Franklin Roosevelt. Well, all of this was going on, and I had just miraculously recovered from the second deadly disease, typhoid fever this time, for which there was then no known treatment. Another terrifying bombshell exploded. Hitler and Mussolini had just signed a pact, a collaboration pact. With that, the noose around my neck got even tighter than before. I expected to be arrested any time. The news that Hitler had sent his SS men to Italy to oversee the enforcement of this racial laws in Italy left no doubt in my mind that my time had come. All doors were closed and all hope was gone. And then came a phone call. The caller introduced himself as the president of the fascist student organization at the University of Naples. Said he, "You know that Hitler is coming to town soon, and Mussolini is assembling the entire Italian fleet in the Bay of Naples in honor of Adolf Hitler. We need you as our representative and official translator of Hitler's speech. You will be with the press corps in the booth adjoining Hitler's. After recovering from the original shock, I politely declined by saying, 'Thanks, but my Italian is not good enough.' He laughed and answered, 'I'm speaking to you, and I know you.' And I quickly corrected myself and said I misspoke. I meant to say my German is not good enough. I believe he caught on. Many anxious days and hours followed. It is difficult to properly describe my emotions during those days. No way to stay and no way to get out. And the prospect of being caught imminently ever present. Then came the day of the parade. It was a bright and sunny day. I decided to leave my one-room back-facing apartment and to watch the spectacle from a nearby cafe overlooking the Bay of Naples. As soon as I got out on the street, I heard a voice saying, "Good morning, Doc. It's a nice day today, isn't it?" And as I turned around, I recognized the friendly voice as belonging to a Secret Service man whom I had met before. He was my landlady's boyfriend. Said he, "May I ask you where you are going?" And when I told him, he agreed that it was a good idea and asked me again very politely, "May I join you?" After the parade was over, he accompanied me to my home, and I realized that it was he who was supposed to arrest me all along. But since he knew me and since he was Italian and not German, he watched me instead. So I remained free to wait and hope and to spend more anxious days and sleepless nights until the papers arrived to allow me to once again leave behind me all and everything that I had so painfully and laboriously created in the past 6 years.